Little Fires Everywhere is the new book to series adaptation starring Reese Witherspoon and Kerry Washington that is dropping episodes on Hulu all this month. And I am here with the showrunner, executive producer, and one of the writers on the series, Liz Tigelaar. I'm Kevin Jacobsen of Gold Derby. And so first off, Liz, I read that Reese Witherspoon and Kerry Washington approached you to be the showrunner of the adaptation of this book. So what was it about this material that really just appealed to you?
Well, I mean, first of all, I think when Reese Witherspoon and Kerry Washington approach you with anything, you're pretty excited. And I didn't know the book at that point. And then I read it, and Laura Newstetter at Reese's company actually sent it to me. And I just fell completely in love with it. I mean, I felt like there were so many points of connectivity for me to it. You know, I'm an adopted kid. I'm a biological mother. I feel like a relatively new mother, and the opportunity to get to go to work every day and explore motherhood and daughterhood just felt like something that was such a dream. So often I think you're kind of having to clamp down that part of your life to tell stories, and instead to get to kind of foster and bring out that part in your life just felt incredible. And obviously the combination of Celeste's beautiful book, this great story, this kind of mystery, this dynamic between these two families, and then working with Reese and Kerry, and then Lauren and Pilar, Lauren Newstetter and Pilar Savone on their teams was just so appealing. It was really a whole team of women who worked to make the show happen, and we got to all collaborate together.
And with adaptations of these kinds of, best-selling books, a lot of them are adapted into films, but it seems like more and more we're starting to see them in the form of limited series or just regular TV series. And I don't know if there was any discussion of maybe just doing it as a film instead, but was there something about this material that just screamed to you that it would be better served as a limited series?
That's a good question. I was never privy to those discussions about it. I came on when they knew they wanted to do a TV series, but to me, it fit the model of such a great limited series. I mean, I feel like there was so much more than 2 hours of a story or an hour and 90 minutes of a story. It felt like there really, there was 8 hours to tell, and I was just so excited to get to kind of go in there and break down the book and write down all the beats and all the character arcs. And I call it kind of like beautiful minding it up on the board, where you just get to put all the story beats up and then see, okay, what's going to fit, what isn't, what can we deepen, what can we mine, how do certain things change in this adaptation. And that was really exciting to me.
Well, speaking of things that are interesting changes from the book to the show, one very interesting one is that Mia, her race isn't really addressed as much in the book or really stated openly, whereas in the show she's Black, and there's a lot of exploration of racial tension and white privilege. So can you just talk about what went into that decision and just how you came to approach that in the writer's room?
Yeah, well, Lauren and Reese approached Kerry with the project and thought of Kerry to play Mia. And Kerry obviously jumped on board and was super excited about it. And so I came in knowing that our version of Mia was Black, and that it didn't change everything, but it did change everything. It didn't change the story in terms of the story beats, but it changed the story in terms of how the characters interacted and what would be truthful for this character and this woman at this time in this position. And I feel like it was such a great opportunity to assemble this amazing team of writers And then for us to dive into each moment in the book and really examine it in a new way through the lens of race. And to say, you know, what does it mean now that Elena is asking Mia to work in her home? What does it mean now that one of Elena's kids is showing up, wanting help from Mia and wanting comfort? What do all these moments mean? And we took that all the way to the end. And I think that again, it just was an opportunity to stretch out the story and to deepen the story. And so you see scenes that weren't in the book, but I think that we as a writing staff really appreciated writing, even scenes that didn't necessarily drive the plot forward, but just showed the relationship between a Black mother and a Black daughter. You know, there's a moment in episode 3 where Mia is brushing down like Pearl's little baby hairs and like doing her edges. And I think that was such a great moment that I had never seen on TV. And we were able to kind of bring forward, because of those changes, small, intimate moments, and obviously big, you know, twisty, turny plot moments because of it.
Mm-hmm. And there's also a lot of microaggressions, I guess you could say, on Reese's part to Kerry, and with a lot of different relationships. But in the writer's room, how did you strike that balance of making sure that an audience sees that and it's apparent enough to the audience that that's what's happening, but also, you know, subtle enough for where it feels realistic, like it's not going too over the line?
Yeah, I mean, we talked about that a lot in the room, and a lot of it was bringing our own biases or blind spots to the room and admitting them. We had really fulfilling, but also really challenging, really transformative, I think, for some of us, conversations. And we really talked about how we were going to incorporate that dynamic. And we really wanted to, you know, Celeste did such a wonderful job in the novel of never painting anyone as good or bad. And we really tried to carry that into the show, where we wanted to just show a truthful experience. You know, from Elena's point of view, she really believes that she's trying to help, and she really believes herself to be a good person who's doing kind things, and she just wants to feel appreciated instead of like a bad person. And I think that's something a lot of us can relate to in our lives. And so we wanted to kind of draw from that, and really it went from the writer's room to the dynamic on set with the director and the actors in terms of how we toned and shot the scene. And then really it carried into post in terms of how the scene was cut and how we landed on Mia's reactions to Elena, so that it wasn't lost on the audience how Mia felt in that moment. And so all of those things were very carefully, you know, debated and curated so that we could kind of show how all the characters were feeling in those moments.
Mm. And also with Celeste, you know, this is her baby, this is her novel here. How involved was she in this adaptation, and also just how did she feel about the changes that were made to her story?
Celeste was an amazing collaborator, and I think that in kind of even just doing press about the show, and she and I have done a lot together, I've come to even more appreciate her approach, which was, you know, she had the great line of like, she wrote the song and now we're doing a cover, and you don't want the cover to be exactly the same as the song. You want to see a new interpretation of it. Celeste knew that we all loved the book. When she came to us, you know, we all had our dog-eared copies, our underlined, highlighted passages. She knew that this was a group who loved what she had done. And we wanted to stay as true to that as we felt like we could, while still making it a compelling, you know, TV streaming adaptation. And so she, you know, she and I met early on, and I talked about some initial ideas for my pitch out of the show, maybe some places that I thought we could mine some stories, you know, whether it was Izzy's sexual orientation, or putting Bill more at the center of things, or even deepening the arcs of the teenagers. All those things were things that we talked about. Including Elena's backstory, not just Mia's. Those were all things that we kind of talked about ahead of time, and I really had Celeste's blessing to do. And then in the writing process, I got to be really free with the room to just kind of go for it. And then once the scripts were written, I would send each one to Celeste, and she would do kind of a Celeste pass. She would do a shaker pass. She would tell us, like, you know, the coffee shop it seems like it should be pronounced Arabica, but everybody in Shaker pronounces it Arabica. Or, you know, seniors don't park in the parking lot, they park on the oval. Just little details that I think made it feel even more authentic. And then there were things, you know, we had to change because of clearances. The store we had to call was named Heinen's, and we had to call it Winans, which was kind of lame. But we joked that everything was we were just gonna put a W on everything and call it like Whiffy Woob and, you know, whatever, McDonald's. But she was great. And I think that, you know, the whole time we were doing it, we just kept thinking, what's Celeste going to think? What's Celeste going to think? As we built to the end, we were like, what's Celeste going to think? And sometimes now it's very blurry for me what was in the book and what was in the show. And because I don't delineate them so much anymore. But even walking on a set for the first time, we, you know, FaceTimed with Celeste or videoed it for her, and we were like, she's walking into she's going to be walking into her imagination. So we really revere her and hold her up with so much just awe and respect for what she created. And I think we've really just wanted to honor it and do it justice.
Mm-hmm. It's interesting what you say about the details, because that's one thing that we should mention is that the show takes place in the 90s, which I think is pretty crucial. And I think it really contextualizes a lot of the characters' behavior and, you know, some of the comments. So how did you just go about recreating the 90s, which doesn't feel like too long ago, but it's also over 2 decades ago now?
I know, it's horrible that the 90s are a period piece. I mean, to anyone who came of age in the 90s, it's very horrific. But but yeah, I mean, like I said, so many of us on the show are moms whose coming of age and youth were really in high school and college. And so we all really connected to this time. And so obviously there are the things like the clothes, the music, what they're watching on TV, Real World, Ricky Lake, all those things that I think are very resonant, the books they're reading, the movies they're talking about. But then there were really philosophies in the 90s and ways of thinking that we can look back now and see how not good it was. I mean, damaging, really. This idea, the concept of colorblindness, that you wanted to not see someone's race in order to treat them equally instead of seeing someone's race. So that is a very detrimental, damaging concept. And I think that was something we really wanted to explore. In the 90s, I feel like that's what people were taught. Same thing with, you know, how we felt about people who were gay. We really wanted to explore that and explore what it felt like. You know, in the 90s, I think any gay kid in a small stifled town with a rigid family would have given anything to hear, I love you anyway. Now, as myself, I can look at that phrase and think, if someone told me that, I would feel so offended. You love me anyway? That's so hurtful, and the subtext is so clear. So just things have changed in a lot of ways, and I think we wanted to explore that, even in just ways we talked about, you know, Anita Hill, Paula Jones. And unfortunately, the book got all the way to Monica Lewinsky, but we didn't quite get there in series. But, you know, that would have been an interesting thing to explore too. So all those things, I think, were things we were really excited to dive into. Yeah. And a lot has changed, but then you look at a lot that hasn't.
Yeah, definitely. And Reese and Kerry are also executive producers here alongside being stars. So I'm wondering just how much input they had in forming their characters and just the overall story itself.
Yeah, they had a tremendous amount of input. It was really a collaboration between, you know, like I said, the 5 of us. And then once we were in production, you know, obviously the director's very included in that too. They were incredible. You know, I never felt like the scripts were done until they had really kind of put themselves in it, and they both came to it with such unique perspectives about their own characters, but then also really had very clear takes on the teenage characters and their own kind of families within the show. And that was a really cool thing to see too. You know, Reese, as a mom of teenage kids and a younger kid, I think has such perspective on how teenagers behave. And that was something so important to her, what teenagers do, how they, you know, how they even sink into the furniture, how they interact with each other during scenes. And I think all that kind of realness was really Reese kind of pushing us to really remember what it feels like to be inside, you know, be inside of these teenage bodies. And then, you know, Kerry was so tremendous in terms of how she brought out performance, I think, within her scenes. You know, she certainly, obviously, gave it her all on her coverage. But what was so amazing about Kerry was what she did during other people's coverage and how she stayed with them and how she surprised them and how they didn't know what she was going to do or say, so that their reactions could be so authentic. And that was something that was really cool to see as well. And then obviously they were hugely influential in post, everything from the music to, you know, how we cut the scenes. And so, yeah, it was a real collaboration. And I can honestly say that at the end of this process, I love and admire them even more than when I started. And I obviously started at a pretty high bar, but they've been incredible, really great partners and really wonderful to me.
Yeah. And looking through your credits, which I did a little earlier today, there's a lot of shows there with like really strong ensembles, Brothers and Sisters, Revenge, Nashville, Once Upon a Time, you know, these shows that I feel like they have an emotional conflict at their core, and there's like deception and there's an element of darkness to them. And I just feel like with these kinds of shows, you get so emotionally attached to them, and I'm sure you definitely do as a producer and a writer. And with this, you know, it's a limited series and you were a part of it from start to finish. So was it hard to just let go of these characters at the end of it all?
Yeah, it's felt, you know, I think coupled with the time that we're in right now, and, you know, this has launched while we have kind of completely shut down as a country. And so we didn't kind of have that closure and ending and like almost like our graduation, like our goodbye. It just kind of stopped abruptly. And so, yeah, I found myself at the end on set. I mean, I almost like get emotional thinking about it, but I really found myself so teary at the end of shooting and at the end of post, because you become so attached to this ensemble. You become so attached to these characters. I feel so inside of each and every one. And it feels sudden to have them go away. It's almost like these two families just left, and I'm like, oh, wait for me, which is very much like the book. So yeah, I'm gonna miss them. I'm gonna really miss them. It was an amazing experience. I mean, probably the best creative experience of my life, and right up there with other shows, ensemble shows, American Dreams, Life Unexpected, that I really hold in my heart. And I think this is one of them that's going to stay with me forever.
Well, thank you so much, Liz, for your time today. Really appreciate it. Hope to see some Emmy nominations maybe for the show in a few months.
That would be amazing.
Definitely.
Yeah, we're so grateful. And thank you so much for talking to me.
And for everyone watching, hit like and subscribe for more award season interviews, and head over to goldderby.com to make some Emmy predictions of your own. So thanks again, Liz.
Thank you.